Hi all, this is just the retrospective where I'm just gonna record some thoughts on Sin in Space. I originally had a bunch of things like planned out on a paper so that I could have my thoughts in order, but then my computer rebooted because it's old and it's crappy and I lost all of it. So I'm just gonna kind of ramble aimlessly, and you can tag along for the ride if you want to. Um, like I say with Sin in Space, it's an interesting book. It's not a good book. The fact that there were the two authors and the fact that they bounced back and forth seemingly whenever one of them would like hit a wall or be like, I'm not sure what's going to go on from here, they just pass it to the other person, led to a really disjointed narrative. And I think that they didn't really sit down and like hash out the details of characters before they started. They were just like, okay, it's going to be told from the perspective of like this doctor, and it's going to be on this colony, and we'll just go from there. And because it was the 1940s, 50s when they wrote it, um, the the woman author kind of defaulted to the man author, like in his decision to be like, well, let's start off with a dude protagonist. It'll be the doctor, and the character is just so distasteful. And you can tell that, like, occasionally when they pass it back and forth, she would try and soften the character up and, like, make him less distasteful. And then it would just go back to the dude, and it would just be, like, the worst doctor ever all over again. Which is just, it drags the whole story down. But you can see that as the story goes on, I think both of them agree that Anna is the more interesting of the two medical characters present. And by the end, she's clearly more like actually developed. Like her character changes and grows throughout the story. You learn things about her, and she faces things that she's afraid of and overcomes them, and like steps into this new ability of hers without being so afraid of it. It just would have been a better story if it was written from her point of view all the way through, and it they just wouldn't have done that back then. We could probably get away with doing it now. Back then, I think that between the two of them, they just never even considered it as a possibility. Which brings me to the racism that's present in the story. I don't think they intended at any point for their colony to seem racist. I think instead quite the opposite. They really wanted it to seem like a utopia where like all of these like real hardworking socialists were getting together, they were gonna make it work, they were leaving the sinking ship of Earth, and they were gonna do better than the mistakes of Earth. And you can see that because of the pilot B. Juarez, and which Juarez in the 40s, like it's very obviously a Latinx last name, and so there are other characters who have what would have been, melting pot, quote unquote, American last names, which are conspicuously lacking in some. Like, let's be real. There's no Chinese American last names. There's no Asian last names at all. I don't think. And there's obviously no last names that indicate any Muslim connections. Which, I mean, you could argue that because it's supposed to be a socialist thing, they wanted to make sure that the colony was not religious and not connected to a religion. But there's a very big distinction between being a Muslim and being part of the Muslim world, and they just didn't get it because they're incredibly white. And I can't say I fully understand it because I'm really white too, even if I'm Jewish. Um, Unnecessary information. But it's just obvious to me that they're trying not to be racist, but the racism is there, both in the omission and overt things. Like, there were some slurs dropped, and I cut them out, but you can probably still tell when I'm reading the page that they're on, because it just causes such a cognitive like slap to the face to read it so casually, like, oh, it's a children's game and the name involves a slur. Like, holy fucking shit, they did not even for 1 second stop to think like, oh, that's not appropriate, that we don't say that to human beings. Like, it just didn't occur to them at all. So they wanted it not to be racist, but it is. And it's very clear that the Doctor and Anne are both supposed to be white, and that everyone in Sun Lake City is either Latino or white. And, like, come on. We could do better than that in our utopia of Mars, guys. People. Moving on. Because it's no Lovecraft, at least they're trying. They're not there. They definitely should have done better and been better, but they're trying. Unlike HP. let's stop saying let's stop saying H.P. Lovecraft is great, because he's not. He's bullshit. But moving on, this is not about H.P. Lovecraft. This is about Sin in Space and Cyril Judd, who's two people. Uh, in terms of, I guess, just science fiction future, that would be a thing to cover. They did pretty well. You know, they're talking about like genetic modification of things. There's some stuff that's like clear bullshit, like an oxygen enzyme. But it's cool that they're out there being like, hey, if we genetically modify some indigenous plant life in an incredibly hostile environment, we could eventually use it to sustain ourselves. Like, that's a theory that we're actually trying to put into practice today, although fucking corporations are fucking it up. Um, so I like that, and I like its anti-corporate message. I really do. Sin and Space is very ahead of its time in being like, yo, these corporations that have put down on Mars and are like just terrible to their workers and don't give a shit that they're making a profit off of Earth that's dying a million miles away because they're here on Mars. What do they care? They've got all the money they want. I really like it. I like that the police are corrupt. They're like, fuck the police. They're in the pocket of the capitalist bastards. So just screw them, you know? I have mixed opinions of Graham. I think he is a bastard character. He's a bastard man. But he was probably a really fun character to write. And there are times when he's a really fun character to read. But I don't know how much I like the fact that he was just like, he just has no morals whatsoever. So he's no moral theater man. Like, he shows up and he is like, hey, maybe I'll help you out. But I didn't. But now I'm helping you out again. But maybe I'll be a bastard again. It's just like, as a character, he should have grown by the end of the story, and he didn't. Which leaves it very unsatisfying at the end. Like, did Graham learn a lesson? No. Does anyone on Earth learn a lesson? No. Again, the racism of they enslave the native people. They don't even consider the fact that naming the native people of Mars brownies and then spending half the book being like, brownies don't exist, when it's like, yeah, and conspicuously absent are also brown human beings in this story. So it's just a little tone deaf there. I was on about Graham and I got distracted by the racism again. Oopsie daisy. What was I saying about Graham? I'm gonna pause this and get my thoughts together. So Graham the bastard man. I think that as a reader, you want to root for him. Like, you want someone to show up and actually champion these kind of boring people in Sun Lake City. Because that's the problem, is they are kind of boring people. And Graham is interesting. The Doctor is not interesting. Being an asshole is not a personality trait, and it's not interesting, and that's what he is. Again, if it had been told from Anno's point of view, it might have been more interesting. She's a psychic. And if we'd known that from the beginning, it would have made a very interesting story, But maybe they hadn't thought of that until halfway through the book. I don't know. So Graham's character, unsatisfying. Sun Lake City, kind of boring. I think you're supposed to be very invested in this baby narrative. I don't know why you would be. Babies are born all the time. And I feel like putting a baby in peril is very cheap. It's just a cheap literary gag. Like, oh my god, the baby. But it brings you out of it right away, because you're like, I can't worry about this baby because it's not real. I need to save that emotion for like something that matters, like a real baby. And there are enough of them in peril, especially in this shithole world that we live in. I say that like we have an option. We don't have Mars to go to. Again, I feel like even a bullshit capitalist hellscape like that probably would have wanted to profit off of a baby being born on Mars. So it feels very detached from like the larger narrative of anti-capitalism that they're trying to sell, and just a general like pro-socialist narrative that like the town didn't like they all were outside being like, yay, a baby, but like the town wasn't as involved as they should have been. It was really just like the doctor's fucking story. And if you're trying to sell a socialist narrative and you also want to throw this baby in here, you got to bring more of the town in. Like I again, it's the 50s. It was sexist, but like, why didn't like Polly could be like, I'm going to the lab today. Gotta go to the lab. Jim's staying home with Sonny. Here I go into the lab. Like that would have been, it would have brought it more together. But again, the sexism of the 40s and 50s wouldn't allow it to do that. I really have a problem with the enslavement of the brownies at the end. Like, being like, well, they want Marcane and we can make it, and we want oxen, so we'll just scrape their lungs, and they're psychic and trusting, so it's fine. Like, don't like it. Don't like the idea of, like, well, we'll just keep the oxen for us, because we're the worthy ones, living here on Mars. Fuck everybody else. Like, the women who are used, abused, and dropped at as sex workers for the Brenner Pharmaceutical and shit, like, oh, we're not going to give them oxen, and the doctor's not going to check up on them because fuck them. I don't like it. It's a shitty morality to have. It's a shitty outlook to have. They're still human beings. They're still the victims of capitalist hellscape. And even more than that, when the capitalist hellscape is ready to throw them out, you should be ready to take them in. Like, don't let the machine chew people up, spit them out, and then point at them and go, well, fuck you, because you stood in the jaws of the machine. Like, they had nowhere to go. They just wanted to leave Earth, too, They wanted to have a better life, and they thought that they would. And it sounds like, for the time that they're there, they're probably treated decently enough. Not great, but they've got, like, heat and commodities, and it's just shitty. And it makes Sun Lake City seem like shitty moralists for being like, fuck them over there, we don't even care. Like, we hear about Big Ginny dies, and nobody cares about Big Ginny's friends. Nobody cares about Big Ginny's family back home. Nobody cares about Big Ginny's funeral. It's just, we're not supposed to care about Big Ginny. And that's really fucking shitty. Because there's like a whole world over there that we're just, they're amoral, so fuck them. So that's the real sin in space, folks, is not caring about your fellow human beings. But I do like that it's very, like, the drug company, its response to having its profit stolen is to pitch a huge fucking fit. But if people are addicted to their product, they're just going to use those people. Like, the Brenner at the end, like, saying it to Jim Candro. He's like, hey, if you're addicted, come work for me. Like, just the shit in the air will give you a good buzz. Like, that's fucked up. It isn't actually what happens in drug factories, let's be real. But the idea of, like, hey, we make this thing, and it's supposed to help people, but, if you get addicted, that's kind of on you, but let's work together to make sure you stay addicted. Like, we're not going to talk about a treatment program. What are you, crazy? So that's kind of real. And, they don't talk about preserving the plant life for the brownies that'll enable them to have a natural dose of Marcane. They just talk about continuing to allow the brownies the extremely refined Marcane, which has unfortunate parallels when you consider that they're just the real world. The fact that they, again, didn't even consider that naming the brownies was fucked up, and then being like, well, we're going to enslave them, and we're going to market them this incredibly addictive substance that's refined. Like, that's just, it's so tone deaf. It's just, it makes it very unpleasant. I wish they named them something different. Give your aliens a different name. Make them not actually related to human beings. And don't enslave them. And don't, unfortunate shit. It makes the book give you a very bad taste in your mouth by the end. There's no other thing for it. Romance in it is bad. Polly and Jim, theirs is fine. Whatever. It's boring. It's very cis and white and hetero And then you throw the Doctor and Anna in there, and it's just like, ew. Like, the Doctor Anna thing is just very, ugh. Like, no, no, thank you. Anna, why are you hooking up with him? Because he knows your secret. Like, that's not cool. And he's just like into Anna because he's like, oh, well, this is convenient, isn't it? She can tell me what my patients are doing, and she can blow glass for me. Like, she's everything that my job requires. And if we're married, I have absolutely no reason to continue to pay her or to consider her an equal. And it's just really screwed up. Like, even when he goes to operate on Sunny, like, he doesn't get his instruments out. He doesn't sterilize his instruments. And he doesn't even hold the patient down. He's just like, you hold the baby. I'm just gonna scrape him. So it's basically like, well, Anna just agrees to be with this sociopath because she feels like she has to as an obligation to the community, maybe? I don't know. It's just bad. It's a bad relationship. It's badly written. And it comes off bad. But I really like how ahead of the time this book is in its anti-capitalist message, and the idea of a socialist space colony on Mars. Also the idea of corporations establishing themselves on Mars as soon as it is viable for people to breathe the air and profit off of it. Like, that's just very real. That's what's going to happen. We're going to have, like, fucking factories mining ice and water on Jupiter's moons before anything. I promise you. And it's just so real. I also like that, you know, occasionally the pseudoscience is very wrong. Like, or just like space stamps. Like, that's just cute. Like, oh, there's no computers anywhere in Sin in Space. We just don't have computers because it was written before computers. Not even like a giant building-sized computer. They're just not present in the story, and that's kind of cool. It dates it. We hadn't even gone to the moon yet, people. We didn't know what was on Mars at this time. Damn. I should stop and get my thoughts together again and wrap this up. But thank you for listening so far. Alright, ultimately, I guess I should just wrap this up and say, why did I even choose to read this story into a microphone if I think it's a bad book, has terrible characters, or boring characters? I shouldn't say terrible, because some of them are fun. It's because, first of all, I just love science fiction. I've already covered that. You know, I like the socialist aspect. That's near and dear to my heart. The anti-capitalist message also near and dear to my heart. And the cover is just so captivating. I really wanted to read this book because of the cover, and to find out that it's just like this weird anti-drug, which again, near and dear to my heart. I think anti-drug propaganda is hysterically funny. This weird anti-drug 40s socialist manifesto about Mars. It was just, it spoke to me. But as I was rereading it, I also realized, like, it's kind of personal, a personal thing, is that they talk about the lethal gene, and that's so easy to, like, scoff at, because it is, like, a gibberish term for it. But shit like that happens. Like, people can randomly have strange genetic mutations that, while present individually in the people, the parents, will never manifest in children unless two parents with the same really recessive gene get together, and then, you know, it can be really sad. My cousin Amy has two children that both have Cockayne syndrome, which means that I'm probably never going to see my cousin's children grow to adulthood. She's going to lose them before they're 30. And it's just, you know, like, you wonder what the purpose of these genetic mutations are, and in another world, you know, like, maybe these children wouldn't die. You know, it's just, it's kind of speculative but sad, and it's just strange to think how odd our own genetics are and how little we understand about what makes us live and die and how to stop and help, you know, like how to keep each other alive through random horrible twists of fate, and in a world that is dominated by capitalist machinery that does not care, and unsympathetic doctors who see us as nothing but case studies. Is still, you know, people still, we just, I don't know where I'm going with this, But Sin and Space is just a weird book. It's a weird book that I feel has strangely aligning morals at times with mine own. And ain't nobody out there was going to read it into a microphone. And while I was in cancer treatment, I could not sit up, and I felt sick all the time, and it was something low energy, just reading a microphone that I could do. And it was also just a good litmus test, like when the book dust was getting to me because I had no immune system whatsoever. It was a good way of telling, like, okay, I really am sick right now. Like, I'm not being just like shitty to myself. I'm not being lazy, quote unquote, because this is our shitty society. Like, again, the chronically ill person in Mars, she's just like, well, I'm dying, but I feel like I need to be productive. It's very real, but you know. Reading an old paperback book was something I could do. It made me feel better. I don't know. And I hope everyone enjoyed listening. Now that I am well, it feels great to be able to read an old paperback book and not have it irritate my nose or my throat or my eyes. And I'm just glad to be done cancer treatment. I'm glad to be done reading Sin in Space. I hope you have some thoughts on it. I'd love to hear from you if you do. I'd love to hear you chat about it, talk about it. Feel free to hop into the Discord. I'll post the link when I post this on Patreon. If you don't subscribe to my Patreon, please consider joining it. You can give as little as you want per month or as much as you want per month. It would be great if you gave me, like, even just $1. Like, I don't care. But, it'd be cool to just, hear from you. You hear from me. We talk. Whatever. There could be a rapport there, is what I'm saying. If you've been listening to this by downloading the MP3s on my website, thank you. That's awesome. You are cool. You're supporting the old internet. Please read my webcomic at inhuman-comic.com. It is science fiction. You probably already read it if you listen to Sin in Space, though. Whatever. It's been a cool project. Maybe I'll do another in the future. See you around.